Hey up and welcome to the Temple of Bleh episode Y. This is a conversation with Richard Termini, pursuing the old history of Roadrunner Records angle. So Richard's another one of those guys that's an example of a life well lived. On top of being a filmmaker, he's also played on some hit records with Cyndi Lauper, The Fix, Patti Smith, but in relation to this particular conversation, we'll be talking about his relationship with Pete Steele, Carnivore, Typo, and his previous band, Pete's previous band, Fallout. So Richard produced the Fallout single that was made before Carnivore was incepted in the 80s. He also kind of really flew the flag for the band in the early 80s before they were handed off to Roadrunner, which is going to go into plenty of detail about. For the pluggables, Richard's also got some music out. You can find this at richardtermini.hearnow.com. That's here, H-E-A-R. I'll put the links and shit in the video description and the Spotify description and all that shite. Richard's music also contains some guitar work from John Campos, who was in Fallout. So that's another big link that brings us all back into the circle. Anyway, this is a super interesting conversation and I hope you enjoy it. Let's jump into it. 1, 2, fuck it up. Of other things going on, I thought, you know what, it's time to do something interesting and put something interesting on my CV, so I thought I'd have a go.
Good.
With
regard, good idea. It's a great idea.
Well, they did something which no other label did, which was they kind of got all the fringe elements of metal and made them platinum and gold, and that's not.
Yeah, you know, and in fact, not to jump too ahead of the story, but since you mentioned it, you know, I never heard of them, right? And I was involved with major label people and would have gotten involved with indie people if I knew anything about it, but I didn't really. I didn't know anybody early on anyway. And I was shopping all these, whatever it was, my own projects and all these bands to the majors. And I kept discovering people, not many people, but I discovered people like Peter, for example. And I thought, you know, this is the next Pink Floyd. These guys are amazing. And I take them to the majors, you know, who eventually were doing things that I was a part of, like these pop hit records that went, you know, triple platinum and all that. So I take it to those guys and they hated this stuff, hated it. Said, what are you doing? This is garbage. You don't have anything to do with it, you know, that kind of thing. So you're absolutely right. I mean, this label that I never heard of, and I don't really know them too much, but just in the most tangential of ways, certainly did a lot more than I was able to do trying to get some of this stuff to the majors. The majors, I couldn't make a dent, particularly in the early days at all, you know, and even after. Truth is, when by the time of Typo, you know, I ran into some of these major guys. Some thing around, oh yeah, we saw your friends, you know, like with a rude sort of comment. Yeah, they were at the airport, they were doing a gig, you know, that kind of thing. They're going to another place and they were like fucking rude about it. You know, it's like, even Typo, they're still giving me the shits, like, you know, these guys are never going anywhere. It's like, yeah, what's wrong with you fucking people?
I think it's
like that.
It feels like, I'm jumping ahead of myself in terms of my own analysis of what that label did, but I think like the scope of the objectives between, say, Roadrunner and a major are completely different. Whereas Roadrunner's happy as long as you're turning a profit. If that means a gold record and that's it, that's fine. But for a major, it's like you got to go 2 times platinum or you can fuck off. I think that might be. It's a different mentality. I feel.
And I like I said, I don't really know them personally, the label guys, but I think they genuinely had a certain taste for certain music that they believed in. And the people I knew anyway, I'm just saying like every dickhead that worked at every major label, you know, but the guys I knew, they were absolutely fucking clueless about all of it that had anything other than a certain very narrow band of like the kind of records you're talking about that, you know, that I think ultimately a pretty pandering type of records. And I played on those because they asked me to, and they paid me money. And I wasn't a session guy at all, you know, but it was like, hey, how'd you like to, you know, whatever. And the genius of that kind of exploitive behavior on their part was that, you know, they knew that I had been a musician all through my life, and all through the 70s, I was doing fairly innovative stuff. And in those days, taking my personal stuff to the majors was no, 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 no. And then in the 70s, they heard what I was doing, and that was being called new wave. It was basically the elements of progressive music that was transmodulating, trying to find a new voice for itself. So you wound up with people ultimately like Kraftwerk and that kind of stuff, as an example. And so they wanted that sound on their 80s records, right? Something I was doing 10 years earlier that they said, nah. So I wound up, think how smart this is though. They got all that R&D from me for the price of a session, you know? It's like, because it's not like they write it down and say, here, play this. They play like, you know, strum, 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 yappity yap. And then you lay down this bed of drum machine, chords, synth pads, this, that, and the other, pulses, sequency bits. And okay, thanks, you know, here's $200, which was a lot if you got $200.
Yeah.
And then, you know, then the album comes out and it's like, you know, some pop drivel, like Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And it's like, oh, that's me, you know. Oh, how many? They made $85 trillion like that. So it was those kinds of people. And I could be rude about it now because, for one thing, I'm really old, and old men are allowed to be, you know, rude and grumpy. But also, you know, they've proven time and time again they suck. You know, they really do. Like they were the people that were most shocked when the digital revolution happened, and keyboardy guys knew it was coming maybe a little bit before everybody, because we saw sampling happening on our gear was computerized, and we saw this sort of the home studio evolving. And they go, nah, never happened, never happened, never happened. All of a sudden, boom, they're all out of work. No more limousines taking them to these giant multi-million-dollar studios. You know, now they're working in some kid's bedroom for whatever they can race off of their website.
They're not talking about units shipped, they're talking about streams.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I've actually seen websites of some of these really famous, you know, they were really famous producers, and like they're offering to mix your record for like $9.95. You know, you send your music up on their website and they'll mix it up for you and they'll send it back to you. I mean, they went from being limo driven, you know, to Madagascar to do some exotic record to being in Johnny's bedroom in the Bronx. So anyway, I'm being funny, but it's the business. Yeah.
Hey, is this light distracting? I should shut the blinds if you want.
Nothing's distracting me. I'm fine.
That's fine.
That's good.
The production quality is what I'd like to refer to as metal. Very low.
That's good.
Low yield.
Sure. All of us have that sort of lockdown vibe now anyway. You know,
totally.
even the pros are like doing interviews now. You know, the government are doing interviews now from their living rooms and stuff.
Yeah, man. When this pandemic's over, man, no one's gonna have any time to speak with me anymore.
No. You're gonna be just fine.
So let's talk about. I wanted to open up by just shooting the shit about yourself, because I think doing my homework, how I came across your name was just basically I'm trying to reach out to Louis quite a lot. But he's kind of like I think he's on like a contact lockdown. He's on Facebook, but he doesn't respond a lot, things like that. And I'm just trying to figure out how they got signed, because I think how Carnivore got signed, it's important to me because it's before the US office has opened, and it tells the story of the infrastructure prior to that US office being opened, because the label itself is kind of like, we all recognize it as being the Monte Carlos of the world and being that New York office and a very New York centric operation. But there were things that happened before that, and it was all being operated out of the Netherlands. So for me, it was like, okay, so Carnivore, maybe even Whiplash as well, sort of occurred before then. So that's why it was interesting. But when I was reading, when I couldn't get in touch with Louis, I was like, well, look, there must be someone who knows how this happened. And your name, actually, no, the specific thing is really specific. I started YouTubing interviews because I was thinking, well, all right, maybe just Pete said it in passing. And I saw a wedding video where the lads were playing, and you commented on the top It's like 2 or 3 days ago. You commented on the top thing saying, "Oh yeah, I was there," and blah blah blah. And I was like, "Oh."
In fact, I shot most of it, and my ex-wife shot me on stage with Louis and John Campos, the guys from Fallout. That's right. So it's my video.
Knowing that you, so knowing that your timeline was like Fallout through to Typo, I was like, all right, at least there's someone on the ground. But I do want to open it by just shooting the shit about yourself, because you're the very image of a life well lived. There's so much you've gone from, like, photography, music, film production, and now you're in Australia. So I'm going to open it with why are you in Oz?
That's easy.
Why are you in Australia at the minute?
Like I say, I'm an older geezer, and my second wife is from Australia, and we came to visit a few years ago, and so let's stay. So that's it. We just decided to stay here since she was from here. It's not really complicated, and it's we've got a bunch of kids, and it's where we live. It's got a small town from another century vibe. You know, it's almost like America in the 50s. I mean, don't tell them that, because the Australians, they get all upset that they've just invented electricity, but it really is. It's like, really, and it's funny because I don't want to get into all this political stuff, but it's really weird. It's like, there's a movie I used to like as a little kid called, which is a grim movie actually, but it's called The Beach. And it's starring Gregory Peck, old black and white film. And it's about how post-apocalyptic, right? Which is really in keeping, because this is eventually I meet Peter, who's like the master of the apocalypse.
This isn't the Danny Boyle one, is it?
No, this is an old film starring Gregory Peck and I forget, maybe Suzanne Pleshette, 1960s film. And it's about World War III has happened, and he's a submarine guy, right? He's a captain of a submarine or something like this. And like, they don't know where to put the submarine, because everywhere they go, they come up and it's like radioactive. Everybody's dead. It's terrible. So the only place left is Australia. It's just hysterical, right? So they go to Australia because the radiation cloud hasn't reached Australia yet, but it's doomed. It's like days to go, And so it's really funny because I move here, and then it's like World War III starts all over the world. I mean, sociopolitically, it's like, what is this, that fucking movie? What's going on now? I mean, it's a slight exaggeration, but you get my drift. It's sort of.
When there's, I guess the demand is a certain isolation.
Yeah.
From an individual. For me, it is. It's like, you know what? I don't want to engage in this massive thing going on.
Yeah.
I'd rather just sort of like, I'd find a 50s town and just sort of like, I'd rather be in a a village.
That's what it's like. It's like I mean, they've got like 3 skyscrapers here, so they think, we got a city, but I'm from New York, so don't get me started. But anyway, to get back on topic.
Yeah. Yes.
Let me start at the beginning. I'll go right through up to like what you're talking about. So, just about me a bit. Been playing since I'm a kid.
Yes.
Playing in bands since the late 60s. Was playing before that, even as a really little kid, But bands started late 60s, and then by the 70s, middle 70s, I built a recording studio on Avenue M in Brooklyn, and my neighbors were the band Fallout, who might have been a few different names before they met me. And I've read online a few things, but I didn't even know that they were called all these other names. I met them when they were called Fallout, and that's Peter, John Campos, brilliant guitarist, Louis, who everybody knows and loves, who invented the drums, and of course Josh. And so they all lived right around where my studio was, and Peter and Josh specifically literally lived 2 blocks away, next door to each other, 2 blocks away from my studio. So we heard about them, and even though by then I was doing a lot of avant-garde and progressive and all that, that coincidentally was dying anyway. What I was interested in most, the whole progressive era was coming to an end, and the newspapers and all that was saying how they were calling us all dinosaurs. I was 25 years old and was already a dinosaur, right? And punk was obviously happening, and disco ruled Brooklyn, that's for sure. And that was kind of depressing from my point of view, but I was still trying to find a way to adapt my interests into, popular music idioms so I could make a living in this thing. I'd spent my whole life doing it. 25, don't tell me it's over, So that's what I was doing. And then I meet these kids, because they're like all about 5 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And they were nailing music from when I was like in junior high school. I mean, genrealistically, I'm not saying it's like retro music, that I loved when I was in junior high school, Black Sabbath and stuff like that. And they were great, and they're doing it for all the right reasons. They were a real band, they were just a real band, and they were fucking great. They really were, and charismatic, and working with Peter, his writing was incredible. His lyric writing. I mean, remember, he was still a teenager, and he wrote the synopsis for the film Terminator 4 years or more before that film came out. Batteries Not Included. Read those lyrics. That's the film Terminator. It's the whole.
Wow.
And he wasn't like he was stuck in a genre. He would hop around. He did horror. He did, I mean, obviously from the name Fallout, that was a concept that he was working with at the time, the fear of the nuclear war and all that, and what are we going to do about it, and cannibalism, and all that kind of fun stuff. And I thought he was just brilliant. And so I got on really well with him, and had a lot of faith in them, and started recording them at my studio, and I became their producer, and eventually we did a single. Which has a version of Batteries Not Included on it. That's not the best version, but it's okay. The one they did in my studio is better. Long story short, we went to a 24 track place for that. And I think the ones we did in my own place were better. Anyway, so that's Fallout, and brilliant band. And and I was trying to get them a record deal, and
was it common for, because you see it's quite a lot in the early new wave of British heavy metal bands as well. There's a producer that produces the first album, and then they kind of adopt a managerial position trying to shop it around.
Well, I did everything, because what do you do? I don't know. I mean, my recording studio, I built it myself. All the carpentry, all the wiring, all the soldering, I'm a freaking keyboard player. What the hell am I doing? I did it all myself. It's just the way I'm an eclectic sort of guy. But I know what you're saying, but you think about it, you find this talented bunch of guys, you think they're great, and some big shots. I knew a few big shots, What do you think? Oh, they suck. Fuck them. Okay, fuck you too. Fine. So I like them. I think they're great. So what are you going to do? So you put your own time into it. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had a studio, so I can give them studio time, record them. And I wasn't a manager other than like my own career, So I just did the best I could. I never really tried to be a manager as such. I just tried to get a deal and hope for the best and see what is kind of a naive way of doing it.
Sure.
But so I just offered, anything I can to make this happen, and figured if this works out, I'll be rewarded eventually, Very much like Joe Boyd. If you know who Joe Boyd is.
I don't know who Joe Boyd is.
You should look him up when you get a chance. He wrote a book called White Bicycles, and he is to Pink Floyd what I am to Fallout, Carnivore, and Typo.
Right. Okay.
He discovered Pink Floyd. He first recorded Pink Floyd. He brought them to the label, all of that. And then the label said, fuck off, and so nobody knows who Joe Boyd is, but he had a similar, and he's an interesting guy. He's a good writer too. I found out about him like 10 years ago.
Still going.
Yeah. He's sort of a famous fella within the genre, So anyway, August 81, mysteriously, and a shock to the system, they break up. And it's like, what the hell's going on here? And it was mysterious. It really was. To this day, I have no idea really why they broke up. And nobody's talking to this day. You tried to talk to Louis. They all say, well, I think it was because it's bullshit. I think between you and me, don't tell anybody this.
I'll edit it out. Yep.
No, you could let it in. I don't care.
Okay.
I honestly
keep it in.
I think somebody gave somebody really bad advice. Do you know what I mean? I think, because remember, they were kids. And I think somebody had an uncle or a brother-in-law or something, and I think they were dissing Peter. I think they were saying, Peter's this is naughty music and oh my God, what's he saying? You know, the stuff they eventually said to him writ large eventually, you know?
Yep.
But I think it was that. I think he frightened some of these people and they thought, oh, you'll never make it doing that. And like I said, I took this stuff to the majors and they were saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, sadly, that broke up the band, right? So they break up. Or whatever broke them up, they broke up. And I went to California for a bit, and Josh and his new band with John Campos came to visit me there in California, and we did some gigs there. I did sound for them and stuff. And they wanted me to produce them, which I eventually did. We did a single with Original Sin. And then when I got back to New York, Peter had Carnivore going, and I thought it was fucking awesome. You know, I thought it was great. And I just want to point out, oops, I broke my microphone. Hold on. That's terrible. That
still sounds all right.
I just smashed into everything. Okay, so I just want to point out, this is important to me to get this point across. To me, I honestly believe that, as everyone loves Carnivore, right? You know, and most people never heard of Original Sin, and most people know who Type O are. You know, is Fallout, the combination of John Campos and who isn't in Type O, Josh is, of course, but Fallout, which was Original Sin and Carnivore stuck together, you know. Campos's influence on Peter was brilliant.
Really?
He wasn't pushy. He wasn't a bully sort of a guy. But what he added to arrangements for Peter and when they would co-write, they did co-write a bit with Fallout. To me, it was almost exactly like Roger Waters and Gilmour. You know, Gilmour on his own isn't writing hit songs.
Yeah.
You know? But you're not going to deny Gilmour's talent. And Roger writes unbelievable lyrics and concepts and all of that stuff. And some of it on its own is absolutely brilliant, fine. But when it combines with the Gilmour bit, you get comfortably numb. You know, and to me, that was what I always expected was going to happen. So it's like that early, they took Peter's Gilmour away from him. So he's like Roger Waters' solo project from then on.
I get it. I completely appreciate that analogy. Yeah, I was just looking at where else John Campos, what else he did, to see if anyone could have like a point of reference. But he actually hasn't done anything since Fallout, it seems.
Yeah. Well, he does. I haven't paid close attention. He and I are still friends, but we don't talk much. But he, I believe he produces and writes, rather than up front and perform. You know, and he plays on the records, maybe produces and writes for, but more pop stuff. But I mean, that's sort of what I mean. Peter wasn't opposed to pop music. Peter loved pop music, but John played pop music better than Peter.
Okay,
you see what I mean? So when Peter would go into that genre, that extra musicality, those extra skills, John would bring in. Then left to his own, maybe it's too shiny, if you know what I mean. You know?
So it's like the pop sensibilities versus the grittiness of Peter. The balance is you have a really accessible lump of dirty, gritty stuff. And you could do the whole range again, and that's why he often says the Beatles as an example. They do the whole range. You could do a sentimental, cute little ditty all the way to you know, some death dirge, grungy thing, you know, and everything in between. And Peter couldn't pull it off as well, the whole arc as well, without John, in my opinion. So it narrowed his range a little bit. Having said that, he's a brilliant concepts guy, and you know, to the degree that by the time he does Type O, you know, he has two bands. He's got Carnivore and Type O because he needed to do more. It wasn't enough just to do this or that. You know, I thought it was kind of all split up, but Type O was brought into the fold. Actually, Type O happened, and then it was shopped around, but Roadrunner grabbed it because because Peter himself wasn't released from the contract with Roadrunner initially. So even if Carnivore split up, if Peter's producing music, it has to be with Roadrunner as a result. I didn't know they existed concurrently. In parallel.
After Carnivore broke up and Peter was doing Park stuff and all that. And Parks Department.
Yes.
and became the big green man and all that stuff.
The Jolly Green Giant.
Jolly Green Giant. He Typo. We get back to the Typo thing, but that after Typo was successful, towards the end of Typo, he reformed a new version of Carnivore.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's what I mean. Like
that's the one I saw.
Yeah, he needed more stuff.
Of course, yeah. Yes, I know what you mean now.
But anyway, getting back to them getting a deal.
Yes.
So Fallout breaks out. See what Pete's doing, and like I had been doing Fallout, I started taking pictures of them again, promoting them again, trying to get them in magazines. I was doing some freelance writing for New Look magazine, which was a brand new magazine, and I got them that article. I think I sent you a copy of that article.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did that. Before they were signed, I got that going, and I took them to the major label friends that I had. By now I had played on a whole shitload of hit records, and I was even playing with the Fix, I think, by then, at least writing with them or for them, not playing with them to do gigs, but I played on their record, and there was talk that I might become like the fifth Beatle in the Fix and this kind of thing. So I mean, the point is I knew people.
Yeah.
And I took them to them, and they all fucking hated it. And I'm saying to myself, what's wrong with you fucking people? Are you nuts? And honestly, I think what was going on, it's a speculation because they'll never admit it, but the thing that offended people about Carnivore eventually, that none of us from Brooklyn saw, at least not in our crowd, until they went on tour, and then they were targeted for death by some fringe psychopaths. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I think that part of the writing, of the storytelling, remember, that's what it is. It's storytelling. These are fucking stories. I think the people I was taking this record to, that's all they heard. They didn't hear story. I think they weren't even going to address what they thought it was. They were going to say to me, your friend's a fucking Nazi. They weren't going to say that. But retrospectively, that's exactly what I think was going on, because you can't deny this music. It's ridiculous to deny.
You totally. Yeah, I guess like once you, especially on a major, if you have like that global sort of vision, you're obviously going to think, well, what's the impact of this record? There's a 1% chance a nutter will go off at a gig, and they go, oh well, we can't take that 1% because if it's RCA that signed them, it's an RCA band, and the brand gets hurt. Blah 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 blah. Blah.
That's what I think. Honestly, that's what I think. It was that kind of thing. And I didn't know at the time at all. I just want you to know, I was clueless that anybody would even think like that, because what are you, stupid?
Why would you? Especially without the internet. If your social circle as well is like all getting well into this, and it's a conversation that's worth having about, okay, God is dead. Why is that controversial in a post-Nietzsche world?
Nietzsche. I used to discuss Nietzsche with Peter when I had first met him, and that's where he got that from. I forced him to read Nietzsche, and it got him going on that subject, and he like instantly started writing about it. I mean, that's the difference. I read about Nietzsche, and then he just instantly made use of it, his stuff. He was fast like that. Anyway, so I couldn't get them a major deal, but I did did a few pieces for New Look, and one was I thought, let's do a thing on CBGB, since I'd been playing there since it opened, and I knew Hilly. I went down there, and it was a new scene for me to see, Agnostic Front and this whole thing, because that wasn't my sort of thing. And so I found it kind of exciting because it's all new, right, for me. And seeing the mosh pits, but to quasi metal, instead of the punk. It was like an interesting hybrid. And I found it very interesting. So I took pictures of the thing and all that. And while there, I talked to Hilly about getting Peter gigs there. And he said, well, tell him to come on down and we'll see how it goes and blah, blah, blah. So Hilly Crystal was open to it. The owner of CB's. Yep. And that was great. And then while there, I think through Agnostic Front, I met Connie. She was there. Yeah. And I didn't know who she was from A Hole in the Wall. And, she had the punky hair and that whole wacky sort of thing going. And, but she was a proper manager apparently. And so I told her about the band, and I gave the number and all this kind of thing. So I'm promoting them. Yep. So the good news is she got them a deal with Roadrunner.
Right.
You know, and how exactly she did that, I don't know, but I know she did that.
Yeah.
And the bad news for me was Joe Boyd. She wanted her own people.
Yeah.
And I got, because I was supposed to be the producer. That was, you know, and I think that's partly why a lot of people don't like talking about this stuff, because I'll talk about anything. I mean, I'm honest about things, and I it's okay with me. But I think a lot of people run the risk of making shit up, and then if they do, I'll say, nah, that's not what happened. So, and I've got photographs and audio recordings to prove my story. So
yeah. I think I'll take a quick break just to discuss the signing bit. So so you're quite certain it happened through Connie. Connie is the conduit of that Roadrunner deal.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So
That's as far as I know at the time. That's what I mean. I gave her the stuff, and the next thing I know, they got a deal, and I'm not the producer. I mean, and that all happened within weeks.
Yeah. That sucks. But from what I know about Roadrunner at the time, so as I say, there wasn't a US office at this point.
Yeah.
Case, who was the owner of the label, managed his affairs in America through a lawyer named Jules Kurz. Yeah. I can't remember how to pronounce it. And Jules was also responsible for representing a lot of majors such as Ozzy and things like that. So knowing that it's coming through Connie is interesting to me, because I imagine Connie's instinct would be to do what you did and try and farm them out to the majors. Maybe through her network, maybe just like blind luck, throw demos at people. And I imagine that's where Jules has picked it up and gone, this is dirty and rotten. This is on brand for Roadrunners. Because Roadrunner got Merciful Fate at that point, Satan, Mad Max, Railway, Whiplash later that year. So my presumption is someone who's got the marketing head on for Roadrunner is going, well, what's kind of antagonistic? Merciful Fate is on the is one of the Filthy 15. Remember the PCMR?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, they're on
Frank
that
Zappa
list.
told them to all fuck off. Yeah.
And D. Snyder said comes in with a scrabbled up piece of paper and starts listing of legislation and stuff. So they're on that list. You got Satan, who I'd called Satan. You got the Satanic Panic happening in the early 80s. I mean, I don't think anyone.
That's right. There was the Satanic Panic of the 80s. That's right. That was really absolutely bizarro.
Yeah, I mean, again, because no one can confirm this, but I think Case's strategy, because he's not a metalhead. The king of Roadrunner, the king of this label, is not a metalhead. He's an opera guy, but he worked in the industry for a good 20 years prior to starting Roadrunner. So I think his thing is he knows what the angle is. He can see a band and go, all right, I don't like this music, but I get why this aesthetic works. So I think he's in the early days of Roadrunner, for his first direct signings, he's finding the antagonists of that world. The Satanists, that's where he smells blood and goes, this is fucked up. Let's get these boys on board. Sure. And I guess Jules is reflecting that intention through for Roadrunner in his capacity. And that's where Bonnie and Jules potentially, obviously there's a missing link there, but I reckon that's where, that must be where it is.
Really, so nobody knows. Like I said, I gave it to Connie, and then after I gave it to Connie, they get a record deal.
Yes,
and then Connie's still there. So that's why, to me, at the time, it seemed like 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally. We now know more than we've ever known.
But it's amazing to me that no one remembers who gave who a tape at that moment. Because. Maybe I did with Connie, so.
Maybe Lou knows like some other details, because there's other details around the deal itself. Why the Roadrunner deal at that time was fairly, it wasn't great. And that I speculate reasons around that, which I'll go into on like the documentary side of stuff. I won't bore you to death here.
Peter used to say, big fish in a little pond.
Yeah,
that's what he used to say.
I saw an interview where he said,
and I said, at least you're in a pond, man.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean? My point to him was, I said, your stuff's going out. This is before they did significantly better with the Type O, but his material got out. I was my own career. I was with the majors, with development deals and all this stuff. I mean, they wasted my time for years. I made recording after recording after recording. None of it was ever released. So, Peter's record, boom, it's out the next day. It's out there. 40 years later, whatever it is, we can talk about it, and it's there. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like his I mean, I didn't know Peter, so I'm not going to speak for him, but the impression I get is his love for having a day job in New York amongst the people he loved, doing the thing he loved, was really, really kind of weighed him down in a way because he really liked doing it. So when someone comes in saying, well, you could play music for a living, there's a potentially a promise of a better life there. And he's like, well, is there really a promise of a better life? And I think that's what he battled with quite a lot in those early days, I think.
Yeah. Well, once they did Carnivore, and I talked about this for interviews for a book, Soul on Fire. And it's not in the book. Nobody wants to talk about this, but it was a shock to me. Peter told me about it. Others, I won't say who, told me about it because they don't want to go on record for any of this. I get it. But I mean, everybody was shocked. I mean, and they were scared. I mean, maybe people don't want to talk about this, but Peter was shitting himself. I mean, he's a big, scary guy, but the truth is, big, lovable pussycat. I mean, he wouldn't hurt a fly, you know. I mean, the people were on television, European television. I've seen the clips, you know, threatening his life.
Yeah.
And for what? You know, he's a musician. What are you people insane? You like that? And so there was so much for all the positive stuff that was potentially happening. There were a lot of people that were treating what Peter was doing like it was some kind of nascent psychopathic political movement that might grow, and you know there'll be a massive killing, you know. And it's like, you people are out of your fucking minds, you know. But it was enough to scare the shit out of that band, I could tell you that. I mean, privately, they all said this to me, that they were scared shitless for a time. And that's what broke up the band. The band broke up. The bad guys got what they wanted. They terrorized that band. The guys didn't talk about it publicly because of the threats. It would only make it worse. And they broke up specifically because Peter was being accused of the most heinous, ridiculous things. And it was wrong and it was unjust. So when he gave it up and got himself a proper job, and Louis got himself a proper job as well, you know, working class hero jobs. You know, he was happy. He was, you know, he was going towards getting retirement, and he didn't work too hard. It was a job he liked. And then the idea of going back there and being called filthy names by a ready to go set of organizations. Because I mean, you know, they're there 24 hours a day, ready to accuse people. You know, that's their job. And he's just some musician trying to write songs. He's not armed in any way, shape, or form. No one is, to defend themselves against that kind of hatred that was directed towards him. And people don't like talking about it, but it's real, man. It was real.
I really, because I didn't have a relationship with him, so I'm not a journalist, so I don't like
well,
asking
you are
these,
now, buddy.
Oh man, I don't like asking these kind of questions because it feels like I'm after a scoop or something. But fuck me, imagine imagine if he was still around today amidst like the big cancel culture and those kind of like cultural, political conversations that are happening now.
Can you imagine? Sure, Antifa and all these fucking assholes.
And we need. I think the voice that he was then. It needs to be, you know, it needs to be here now, doesn't it? I guess, just to sort of speak, because he's not a Nazi, obviously. He's not.
No way.
You know what I mean?
No way. Absolutely not. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I think
he believed in the American Constitution, free speech, the work ethic, family. You know, he was kind of sort of conservative. He went off the rails. It's a whole nother story. And I'm not even going to where all that fucking came from, but he was under a lot of horrible pressure that no one should have had to endure. And let alone just some, you know, working class schlub from Brooklyn. Cause I mean, he was a talented musician and writer, don't get me wrong, but beyond that, he was just some working class guy. Why should he be equipped psychologically with the weaponry to defend himself against an organized assault against him and his family and his projects? I mean, everything he did, they tried to destroy as he was moving forward. So again, credit to his label for saying "fuck off" and still helping him out. You know, keeping it going. I'm amazed.
It's actually. Sorry, go ahead. No, after you.
Well, I just wanted to say, just back to the topic of Roadrunner and all that, and the Connie business and all that. So, when I did not produce the record, and it was just unspoken. It was really funny, but I put in a lot of, just between you and me, I put in a lot of effort, and one would have liked to have produced it. And I think it would have been great. Someone might from the period might say, well, you were doing progressive and avant-garde music, and even though you like them or trying to get them a deal, doesn't mean you'd be a good producer for them. But I totally disagree. I mean, if you look at the Talking Heads, for example, who were considered, I don't know why they were considered punk, which is ridiculous. They weren't. And who they get hooked up with? Brian Eno. Brian Eno was one of those people accused, who I think is brilliant. He was being accused of being one of the dinosaurs. It's over for Brian Eno. And he hooks up with the Talking Heads. Boom. Are you kidding me? Fantastic. And the whole becomes the great of the sum of its parts, And so I think I could have done a great job on that, just between me and the universe. But having said that, when they did the record, I did get invited to play on it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you could see that. There it is. See that machine there? That's the synthesizer that I used on that first Carnivore record.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
very cool.
What happened is when we did Fallout, Peter had a few post-apocalyptic numbers even then. And we did a soundscape at my studio of, bombs dropping, machine guns, lasers, robots stepping on people and all that kind of, but like a radio experience, just all sound effects. And the girlfriends and the roadies were all in there screaming, Gary and all those guys, and Billy and the Christophers were there, and brilliant. And they were just screaming, doing all that. And it sounded great. It sounded, really good. So when they did Carnivore, Peter wanted me to do that again. And so we recreated it sort of kind of. The original one we did for Fallout was much better because it was at my studio, had all the time in the world. The one we did for Carnivore was sort of rushed and sounds more like a video game version of it. Right. Okay. But that's the synth that we used for that. And that's the same synth I played Girls Just Want to Have Fun on and She Bop and all those songs. So it's a great machine. You're going to
sell it to Hard Rock Cafe, Perth.
Yeah, if they offer me $1 billion, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'm leaving it to my kids, But I still use it to this day. It's a beautiful instrument.
Yeah. So about you synth guys, man. You've always got the first instrument you've ever owned, right?
You try to. I mean, I did sell some of the instruments I should have never sold, like my Prophet 5 and my Memory Moog, and that was stupid,
Yeah.
But anyway, so when Carnivore break up, and Type O break up, I don't know what the hell they were doing for a while there. There was sort of a vacuum, and I was doing more teaching by then.
Right.
And one day, I just see them at my door. Josh and Peter are at my door. Oh, hi guys, how are you? And what's going on? Because I hadn't seen them in maybe a year or something. And they gave me this tape called Repulsion. And I said, oh, thanks, man. Come on in. You have some code. No, we got to run, but, this is what we're doing. And maybe you'll produce it. Now, because of what happened with Carnivore, I really wasn't in the mood to start working for free again, And because I honestly, between Fallout and Carnivore and and Original Sin, it's like years of work.
Yeah.
And also, I had, I think my first son might have been just born and that kind of thing at this time. So anyway, I was busy and I had a day job teaching audio technology and producing and that kind of thing. So they gave me this tape with Repulsion on it, and I listened to it. And of course that winds up being the first Type O Negative record, most of that. Yeah. And I don't even know if I contacted them about it at the time, after they gave it to me, I don't think I addressed it directly. But so regarding what you were saying, I wasn't there for all this, but it's my understanding that Louis' drumming student was jamming at or rehearsing himself at Josh's studio,
Right.
Which was a split level thing. He had the control room was in an old bedroom, like on the second floor, and the live room was the basement. And so Louis' student was playing, and started jamming with Josh, and or he asked Peter to jam with him, that kind of thing, because he lived just 2 houses, 3 houses down. And so anyway, somehow Josh and the drummer and Peter
are in the same room.
All get together. Yeah. And the nascent typo negative happened, the idea of them actually getting back together again. Why John wasn't brought back into it, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't interested. John, in those days, I was still playing gigs, and John, in fact, John Campos was in one of my bands for a while.
Right.
There was like a lot of crossover. Louis even did some New York Space Ensemble gigs, one of my bands, with me. But so it was a funny time. It was all sort of amorphous. Next thing I know, they got a record out, and it's typo negative.
Yeah.
And I know they were going to be Sub-Zero, and that didn't work out because there was something called Sub-Zero, and then Repulsion didn't work out and they already had the tattoos for Sub-Zero.
Yeah.
Brilliant. You know that story. It's a great story. He's like, what the fuck? We got the tattoos. And he came up, typo negative. Brilliant. Because you have thing you heard on the radio, blood drive. And here's the other thing. My blood type is type O. So my actual blood type, just so.
Is it negative or positive though?
It's not negative. It turns out it's positive, and I was disappointed by that.
Well, if you're in a pickle, give me a shout, because I've got the same blood type.
You too.
Yeah, I think O positive is it's one of the more common ones. I think it's like when you're in AB negative, that's when you're a rare breed.
Yeah, that's where it gets rare. Yeah.
So let's talk about the photos for a bit. And the reason I asked the question knowing the answer, but the thing is, quite often, especially in the early days of the label, a lot of bands have relationships with photographers and artists and things like that, and they typically push a particular cover, and then the label say, yeah, that's a great idea, lads. And then they go, fuck that, we'll just get this other thing in. So I was wondering if anything else happened in that space, because obviously you were quite central to the artistic or the visual aesthetic, let's call it that, with the photos. Obviously, there was photo shoots out in the desert, which really sold the whole barbarian theme and things like that. I was just wondering if there was any of that was discussed to be the output for the album.
Well, I know, I can tell you exactly what happened. I'd been a photographer since I'm a child, like being a musician, and I was even doing films, although it took a while before they got good enough for me to say, look at my film. But I was doing this stuff forever. So I was doing it for my own band. I was playing gigs with my own films, playing on stage with us, So I was doing all that kind of thing in the 70s. Even at CBGB's, I did that. I put up a screen with the punks screaming at me. What the fuck are you doing with a screen? It's not a movie house, this kind of thing. But anyway, I was. That's one reason why I got along and really loved what Peter was up to. He thought in a similar way to me in terms of big and theatrical, and let's try this and let's try that.
Big concepts.
And he wasn't afraid to say God is dead, just in case, maybe, who knows? It was all storytelling. It was all exploration. It's all freedom of speech. It's all the arts.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got along real well on that. And when he introduced me to what he was doing with Carnivore, and I saw the barbarian suits, I said, well, let's do it. So let's do it like a movie. We'll go, we'll shoot some. And the idea was I was even going to bring my movie equipment and shoot it like a film. But I got lazy and I just brought my Leica. And I shot all the stills for all of that. So we just did it, one day. I think I shot 3 or 4 rolls of film, and I just did it just to do it. And I gave them some of the best to use for whatever they wanted. Then one day I get a phone call from Holland, and I remember I was asleep, and I was like, "What?" Hello, I don't know if they really talk. I can't remember, but they said they were from Holland, and I said, what are you calling me for? And they said, do you have any more of those pictures? And they explained who they were, because I really didn't know who they were. And Peter wasn't a very communicative, if that's the right word, kind of guy with this stuff. It's not like he called me up and said, Rich, there's a business meeting on Thursday and we're going to do this and that. We like your picture. That never happened. I would do stuff. I'd give it to Peter and it would just either get used or not. It was a black hole. There was no communication.
Yep.
So nobody said Holland's going to call you. They just did. And they said, do you have any pictures? And I said, yeah, I shot rolls of it. And they said, can we have some? And I said, yeah, sure. What's your address? So I just sent them like a box of photos, and they used one from the Marine Park Creek area, the one you call the desert sessions.
Yes.
That's right across the street from Avenue U in Marine Park, Brooklyn, right across the street area. We euphemistically refer to as the Creek. And also Mau Mau Island. That's the little island that we're on. It's actually a little island. It's called Mau. We call it Mau. I don't know if it's its real name. We call it growing up Mau Mau Island. So we went to Mau Mau Island. It's hysterical, dressed like that. It was absolutely fantastic. And we took those pictures. So I sent them a box load, and then one of those pictures was used as the band photo.
Yep.
On the record, but nobody asked me or told me they were going to do it. I mean, honestly, no one. It just came out. Look, here.
I think you didn't see a penny for this, I guess.
No, never got paid a dime from the label for any of the work I did. Nothing. The demos, the photographs, never.
Yeah.
I got some credit, you know.
Yeah, that's something, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Carnivore thing, I used a pseudonym.
Darkside.
Yeah, Richard Darkside, right.
Yeah.
For the synth work. I don't even know why I did that. It might have been because...
maybe you were scared of Jesus Hitler.
It might have been the Nazi stuff that they were already talking about. I don't know. But that's kind of early. Not the band talking about it, I mean the threats. But I think it's kind of early. The threats weren't there yet. So I think I was just, you know, I'm sort of rambling. I apologize.
No, it's cool. This is exactly what this whole discussion's about. We just go down the rabbit holes, we tell stories, and we try and get an understanding as to why that label did what it did. Yeah, that's part of the story.
I had a minor dilemma for myself personally because I did filming and photography, and I was a musician, and I was an audio engineer, and I was a producer, and 99% of that is self-taught. I felt at some point people aren't going to take this serious or that because you can't be all these things. So I thought maybe I should be 3 people. And then, and that was about the time. So I think I then, fuck it, you know, just, I couldn't keep track of it myself. Okay, who am I today kind of thing. So I dropped it. But a couple of times I thought, well, I'll produce under this name and I'll be a musician under that name. And then I gave up. I thought it was all retarded. So I think that's why I did the Darkside thing at the time.
No, makes sense. Makes sense. How did the band reconnect with you for World Coming Down then?
Oh, to play on the record?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. You know, for years, Josh and I were still in contact, even though I had moved out of Brooklyn. I think mostly like online, email and stuff. And on the phone, and all through the Type O period. And this might sound self-serving. I really hope it doesn't, but it sounded to me that he was just wanted to bounce off of me because, you know, he learned engineering from me, obviously. I built his recording studio. The physical construct was done by the roadies, but the design of it was done by me, and some of the wiring was done by me. And I showed him the first days how to use all the gear and all that. So, you know, I had that kind of avuncular relationship with him. I was sort of, you know, like the older guy helping him out, which I was happy to do. So through the years, we maintained that sort of relationship, and he would call, and it sounded to me like he's asking for advice. Like he didn't say, "Hi, Rich, I'm asking for advice," but the conversation always went to some issues they were having. The record's going this way, whatever. And then like what pause, you know, waiting for me to comment. And so he obviously wanted my feedback on things. And one of the things, they were in a rut, they felt, or he felt. And there were other things going on that I won't talk about, but I stick to the music, you know, and the band situation. And one thing I thought was, Peter is a remarkably eclectic guy. And why is Type O Negative making the same fucking record over and over again? You know, conceptually, I mean. And which is why I was saying he started doing Carnivore again, because he needed, he couldn't do Carnivore in Type O Negative, but really he could have. Why not? It's his band.
Well,
So,
Kill All the White People is pretty Carnivore-esque track.
Yeah, well, there you go. So why not? But the fact that they couldn't do it all into one band is my point. I was saying that Josh, almost like what Paul McCartney was trying to do with the Beatles, I guess, realizing like with his whole Get Back idea that didn't work. We'll get back to our roots, guys, And I thought, well, you used to just play as a band in a room and I'd record you, going way back when, and we'd do the best take and then a couple overdubs and we're done, and that's it. And they started turning into these more sort of production-y things,
Yeah.
And with a narrow beam, it seemed to me, of what the Type O sound was. Like now there was this Type O sound, And I told Josh all this at the time on some of these phone calls.
Yeah.
And I said, what you should do for fun, just to mix it all up, in the middle of a Type O Negative record, have Fallout appear, another band, and bring Louis and John back. And all of you play on, say, 2 classic Fallout tunes from yesteryear.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle of a quasi concept record, Type O record.
Yeah.
Since they were already talking about like the beginning and the end and death and this and that. How about beginnings and deaths? And you can actually have the resurrection of something that was, which still exists, which was interesting. It wouldn't be fictional; it would be real. Yeah. And I really pushed that idea to Josh. Like I forget when this was, like 2000 and change, 2000 and something.
Welcome down. I think it was 99. So yeah, that roundabout turn of the century.
Well, these conversations were probably like 2005 or something.
Yeah.
And I was saying, stick Fallout in the middle of a Type O record. And I still think that's a brilliant idea. I thought it would have been great. And they could have done Batteries Not Included and maybe Parthenophagia or Under the Tracks, Under the Wheels.
Fallout's obscure enough that you could probably have gotten away with it without the label noticing as well.
Yeah, and I think it would for the fans. It would have created a whole huge explosion of interest.
Yeah.
And it would have done good for John and Louis, who both deserved the attention. Yeah. And also, I think it might have been a big enough jolt in the band's system that then they could come out of it with more directions, because that's what I was trying to do. How to keep this thing alive and interesting, because I was hearing, again, I don't want to get into like personal stuff, but that, something was wrong,
right.
And in the end, Peter winds up dying at a ridiculously young age. And I wasn't there for that. But I obviously, whatever's happening in his personal life is tied to what's happening with the band. Because, and so looking at it, particularly when you're as dedicated an artist as he was, that there was one and the same in a way. And so what can you do to make that thing more exciting? So anyway, get to the point about how I wanted to play it on the record was, in one of those conversations, Josh told me Peter wanted me to play on the record, which is funny because it makes me think that the Fallout playing on the record idea almost took root. And they didn't go that far, but it became, well, let's have Richard play on it, for old time's sake, kind of a thing, I guess. I really don't know their motivation, but I was happy to do it. I was very pleased to be in the studio with them again. It was great fun. It really was wonderful. I had a great time that day.
That's awesome.
Systems 2 was the studio. Systems 2 in Brooklyn. Great place, great people.
Yeah. One thing we didn't mention for the Carnivore record, is World War 3 and 4, which is the soundscape, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in there.
That's what I don't think we mentioned it by name, and I think it deserves mentioning. And I think I've completely bled you dry of Carnivore and Pete knowledge, really. But one thing I wanted to mention was we were talking about sort of the aesthetic and what Pete was all about, and I was thinking the other day, the weird sort of pop sensibilities of I'm going to just say Peter, not necessarily Carnivore, not necessarily Fallout, but the whole thing, the whole aesthetic.
Yeah.
We're talking about pop sensibilities in sort of a more gritty and dark tonality. I was thinking about this earlier, and I had a flashback to With Nail and I. Have you seen that film?
Which one?
With Nail and I, Richard E. Grant.
Nope.
And so at the end of that, it's basically a film where there's two actors and they go up to the Yorkshire Dales where I live, and they go on a holiday, and basically they just get shit faced. It's a whole meditation on like the death of the 60s and things like that. It's quite, and at the very end, one of the characters says, you know, the 60s have ended and we have failed to paint it black. That's kind of like the whole, that's the film sort of wrapped up in one line. And I was like, Peter did paint it black. He's got the sort of like the sexuality element to his music, very sort of free loving. However, it's sort of marred with a taboo, not of his own design, but it's everyone else's problem. He's the one that's painting it. He's taking those ideas that were prevalent in the 60s and painting them black. And I was like, fuck, that's what he's done. He is the painted black. But I think that speaks to his aesthetic. I don't know if you'd agree with that. But
that's a good assessment. I mean, listen, Peter and I, even though he's a little bit younger than me, okay, when I grew up, they had us hiding under our fucking desks. I mean, how sick is that, right? We're the most privileged generation in the history of mankind. We've got more money as a country than anybody knows what to do with. We saved the world from the Nazis. We were fighting single-handedly the fucking communists, you know, and America, right? But we're hiding under our desks. Well, which is it, you know? And when you're 8 years old, it's a little fucking confusing. And then when you look up and you see the Fallout shelter symbols, and what's this about? And they don't explicitly tell you. I mean, maybe some people did in some states, but where I was from in Brooklyn, they never explained anything. Okay, now kids, under the desks, you know? Why are we under the desks? Fallout, in the case of, you know, right, the Chinese, any minute now, they're going to blow us up. And they're pulling the same shit now, you know? Yeah. So Peter grew up with that. The band's name was Fallout. I mean, he was raised with all of this stuff, same as I. And he had that fly in the wall attitude about it. It's like, you mean to tell me the world might blow itself up any day now? I mean, this is sort of, well, what's that going to be like? And then he'd write the song, you know? And you mean to tell me there are people doing this and people doing that, and he'd write the song. And then just the fun stuff too, you know, just horror movie stuff. I mean, sure, he liked horror movies, so he just did that. But I think he identified with Willard a little bit, like personally, you know, the film Willard. You made me hate myself. That's a line he used in Fallout. He used it again, I think, on one of the either Carnivore records or I don't know if he did use the line, but in Fallout he screams, "You made me hate myself," which is a line right out of the film Willard. Because he did have a little bit of that self-loathing thing coming in and out of his life now and then, which I used to bitch slap him about. What the fuck is wrong with you?
It's a quality of all comedians, though, which is effectively what he was as well.
That's right. That's right. It's true. It's true. Yeah. But I just to mention one other thing, the photos of them in the butcher shop once Mark joined the band, that's all my stuff too. I took all those pictures, and I didn't get paid a nickel for that either. But and I think those are really good pictures. You know, I really like those. You know, they're stupid. And then the whole throwing the meat thing started from that. You know.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll wrap it up. So, and I ask everyone this: have you ever seen a ghost?
No, I never have. I've never seen a ghost, ever.
I have had some responses where people have like actually sent me pictures of shit they've seen. So if it comes across if it comes across as like the weirdest thing you've heard, and why the fuck is he asking me this? I just think it's a nice sort of like, what's the opposite of an icebreaker? It's like an icebreaker that closes the conversation. Let's not talk shop anymore. Let's talk about weird shit.
Sure, it's a good closer. What's your favorite color, and what's your favorite curse word and all that stuff? Sure.
Yeah.
I like it. It's good, and I have never seen one. So
well, thanks very much, man. I appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Norman Dunn, he was the producer of that first record. Is he still around? Do you know?
I don't know. I didn't know him. I never heard of him. I met him that day that I did the soundscapey thing in the studio that one day. I hung out. That's not all they did. We did that, and they did guitars and stuff when I was there. But that's the only time I...
Nah, it just occurred to me he did... Yeah, he did Carnivore. He did a few other Roadrunner ones for that era. So again, it sort of fits into my weird lexicon of what happened in the States before the US office anyway. Well, thanks very much.
My pleasure. One thing I'll try to remember the day I met Connie and told her all about Carnivore. I took her picture and I have it somewhere. Oh, wow. So if I find it, I'll email it to you.
Oh, thanks, man. If
like her standing in CBGBs, like at the bar.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. If you have anything sort of material wise, fire it over. Again, it'll be your copyright on it and your source, as I've just described. Similarly, with the article, we were talking about if I could use it. Actually, I think what I need to do is I just need to reference it correctly, and it's fair game because it's all fair use. I don't run any ads on my videos or my podcast, so it's like no one's making any money off it. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, but the article that I did, that was for New Look magazine, 1985.
1985.
Bob Guccione owned it at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. That's all I'll need to make sure it's referenced correctly and it's you know, cited correctly. Sure. All right. Well, cheers, dude. If you come across anyone who used to run in that circle who might be interested in this side of the conversation, because we're talking about, I talk a lot about the business decisioning that kind of informed the band, and things like that. If anyone's interested in that side of it, let me know, and I'm happy to hear their story as well.
Sure. Yeah, and conversely, if you find out exactly why no one decided to let me know that they were going to use another producer, and why, and I you know, what I mean, nobody said anything. It's really.
This is what I think. I think. Because Norma did Whiplash, she did another few things. My suspicion is that because Roadrunner are quite prone to trying to find one producer who's responsible for a sound and kind of like using them exclusively. Like with death metal, it was Scott Burns with the death metal guy, and I think they tried to get Jeff Watts from Annihilator to make make him the thrash metal guy. So this is the sort of stuff I'm trying to piece together for this whole narrative. So my suspicion is Norman was going to be their guy for those initial, that kind of hardcore thrashy kind of sound, I think. Yeah. Or at least they tried to make a relationship with a producer from the early doors so they can have a little bit more control over the output. One or the other. This is me stringing together the coincidences that Norman was the Carnivore producer, the Whiplash producer, worked with Anthrax as well, which weren't a Roadrunner band, but it's reliable credentials, right? So I think
I'm pretty sure wasn't Connie with Anthrax at the time. I mean, I thought Roger introduced me to Connie. I'm not 100% sure, but
let's give it a Google.
I don't remember.
Connie.
But I was with him and interviewing Anthrax. Yeah. And then I got introduced to Connie, unless she just muscled into the interview, which is possible. You know, I really don't remember. But my focus was interviewing the bands, and this woman Connie winds up being involved in the conversation.
I can't see any reference to Connie or Connie Barrett or Connie Barrett manager with Anthrax.
So she just muscled her way into it. Yeah.
With Whiplash? Was she managing Whiplash? I think she was. Sorry, I know I'm wasting your time when.
No, it's not at all. It's good. I'm having a good time.
Yeah, Connie Barrett is also got an executive producer credit on Whiplash, Power and Pain, which is another, which is sort of same era-esque Roadrunner album. So maybe it's
and Crumbsuckers too, it says.
And Crumbsuckers, yeah.
I found something about Crumbsuckers.
Maybe we could extend the theory from Norman and to Connie as well. Maybe Connie was on the ground.
That's what I thought. I thought it was Connie. I thought I guess a guess that and Louis not talking about it is probably because he doesn't know, you know, because Louis wasn't doing business.
I think
he wasn't the business guy. You know, Peter would say, "We're making a record Thursday," and then Louis go, "Okay," you know what I mean? It wasn't like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Louis' approach. Well, he just hadn't responded to anything, which is probably because on Facebook and other things, it's probably inundated with requests like this. So
that's true too. Yeah. Probably, I'm guessing too, but I don't know. I don't know. I do know my experience with working with all of them through all those years from Fallout on. I never called Louis and said, "Louis, come to my studio on Wednesday at 8." It was just either Peter and maybe Josh. That was all the conversation. Even John Campos didn't talk to me about it. So they had never really any idea of what Josh or Peter were up to until they did it. So Connie would have dealt, I'm guessing, directly with Peter and the label, if that's how that went down. But
it's too much of a coincidence that her name comes up with Carnivore and Whiplash. And those are two Roadrunner bands that happened before Roadrunner establishes their US office.
Well, I know for a fact she's the one I handed it off to, and then I wasn't the producer and they had a record deal. I mean, it was like within weeks.
Yeah. So. And Jules, the lawyer, Case's lawyer in the States, has passed away as of 7 years ago, so I can't find the information there either. Holly Lane, who was opened the US office, she's passed away, so it's like there's a horrible blind spot.
Right.
But
I don't know.
Yeah, that's.
But it's a moot point. But I remember with Carnivore, I was shocked, actually. Not shocked is the wrong word, too strong. That Keith, a guy I didn't really know until I met him, with Peter, that he was so outspoken and aggressive, because it was always Peter, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, who's this guy, you know? So if any of them would have been trying to be as involved as Peter, it would have been Keith, which is, I think, partly why Keith got thrown out of the band, because he was challenging Peter's authority constantly.
Yeah.
So, but having said that, one of my point is he probably would know, and maybe I don't know his family, but maybe some of his family might have some insight into some of this stuff.
Maybe
because when I remember when I did one of these interviews for Carnivore to promote them, he was talking to me like in a manipulative way, like trying to play the writer, like I'm the writer and he's trying to manipulate my story and make sure I get all the right stuff, and not realizing that this is a friend talking to a friend, doing everything he can to promote you assholes, And it's like being like, all dodgy and businesslike. So if anybody might be up on what happened business-wise, it might be him. I don't know. But like I say, he got killed on a bicycle or something, if you can believe that shit.
Yeah, 2002 or 5, I believe.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, fucked up, man. Very fucked up.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't think I've got anything. I think we can end on the perhaps the speculation, the theory that Connie is like that is the linchpin to those older US bands.
And like I say, if you know more, let me know. I'd like to know. But that's what seemed to happen in my opinion. When I did this article of Carnivore and all that, she wasn't around. That happened after the Reich and Roll piece and the photographs, and then it's months before the article comes out. In that period. Anyway, we're just going in circles right now. But hey, I don't believe in ghosts. I never saw one. And best of luck to you. Stay in touch.
Yeah, cheers, man.